And yeah, turn on the microphone. Usually works that way. I'm Gary J. Russ, and welcome back as we continue the Way Out There show. We're heading into our final part of Way Out There here on GJRB Online. In our final half hour, we're going to do a 45 minutes of non-stop talk right here on GJRB Online. That's right, 45 minutes of non-stop talk for you here on GJRB Online. Continuous talk and music and whatever we plan to do in the last hour. It's usually our last hour doing some final things in our wrap-up hour of our program. The last part of our show, and we're just going to be talking and playing some music and just doing different things in our last part of the show. Also, in this last hour, we'll do our schedule of what's coming up on Coast to Coast and see who is on the guest lineup for Dave Scott tonight. All coming up this hour on Way Out There on GJRB Online. Spaced Out Radio. We'll talk about Spaced Out Radio and a whole lot of other stuff coming up in this last hour of Way Out There here on GJRB Online. We're going to wrap this program up in this hour. So let's continue with Way Out There here on GJRB Online. Also coming up in this final hour of the program are Spreaker podcast shout-outs and promotions coming up. And we'll see what's going on this week on GJRB. What kind of programs we're going to be doing, and trying to iron out our radio schedule. And like I said before, I'm working on that consistently and seeing what we're going to be doing as far as our radio is concerned. No radio tomorrow, but we'll be back on the air. Let's see what happens on Tuesday. Maybe later on in the day, we might do a Gary Russin program or something, or a Gary J in the afternoon. And then Wednesday, Gary J in the afternoon, maybe. And then Thursday next week, from the Church of Christ. We've been having issues over there, as I was been telling you yesterday, as far as signal. Been kind of experiencing signal issues up there. So we've been broadcasting at a minimal, but I'm working on the see, I'm losing track of my memory here. I'm losing my train of thought here. It might not be broadcasting there Tuesday. I know Tuesday I'm thinking about perhaps I need to use that day because what I want to do actually, let's see, the reason I'm doing is tomorrow. Okay, tomorrow the reason why I'm not going to broadcast is because I got some stuff to record for Radioland. So I'm going to record Radioland probably Monday, later in the day. So sometime Monday I want to record Radioland, either Monday or Tuesday. Either one of those 2 days I'm going to record Radioland. And so that I can schedule that. And I'll let you know when that's going to be on. That's going to be a podcast recorded on Audacity for a full 3 hours. Because I've been doing Radioland live here on Spreaker, and I have to flip in the second half hour, and it gets complicated trying to do that. So I decided to do the full 3 hours on Audacity non-stop, so that I can just load it up on Spreaker as a recorded podcast. So that's what I'm going to do, and I will schedule that. And I don't know when yet. When I record it, I'll let you know. I'll put it on the program schedule here on Spreaker. Program schedule I will post on Facebook and on MeWe and let you know when that all is going to be going down. And I'll have a schedule set up. It was originally supposed to air on November 12th, but I'm canceling that November 12th because of the new program I'm on with Brian. So I decided to make that pre-recorded, and I'm going to record it either Monday or Tuesday afternoon so that I can get that on. I might even do it tomorrow. I get all my intros done. I might just go ahead and record it tomorrow. I like to watch the Hawkeyes, so pretty much it's going to be that. And then perhaps Monday or Tuesday next week, I'll probably be doing that. So just to let you know about that. We're a little past weather on the 5s. So we're going to do that any time in the hour that ends in 5. And I want to do a Clinton weather forecast and give you our Quad City weather for people listening locally. That's in the final hour. So we're going to kind of skip over that part and get ready for the next hour of Way Out There here on GJRB Online, here on Spreaker across America. Thanks a lot for tuning in. This is the program that talks about the strange, the bizarre, the unusual. Coming up in the next half hour, we're going to talk about the afterlife. And be talking about a story about a guy who actually died and came back. He was in hell. We're going to do the final part on that story, and we're going to wrap that up. And then we got another story about a guy who went to hell and came back and changing his life for Christ. So we're doing those now. And a little bit talking about his visit to heaven. So we're going to do all that coming up next on Way Out There. And then in our final half hour, we'll do our program schedule for Coast to Coast AM. So that's coming up. All right here on GJRB Online, our last hour of Way Out There here on GJRB, here on Spreaker. And I'm Gary J. Russin. Hope you're enjoying the program wherever you're listening. And we're going to get started now on our final part of the hour. But before I do that, I want to remind you that you are listening to Way Out There on GJRB Online, the strange, the bizarre, the unusual. And this is the last show. This is our season finale of Way Out There for this time round. I'm going to be working on some new shows for next year. It's going to be a new format. We're going to do half-hour increments. I'm going to be working on having guests on. Now, I'll still probably be doing the show this way from time to time. If I don't have a guest or if a guest backs out on me, I'm going to have backup material to cover a show. So I'll still be doing this from time to time, but we're going to go to that half-hour increments, kind of like what George Norrie does, what Dave Scott does. When we go to that 3-hour broadcaster plan, I'm going to be doing a new format of this program, and we're going to be having guests on our show. And so I hope you'll tune in for that. We're going to probably do a half hour. Actually, probably be where if I have a guest on the program, as I told you many, many times on other shows, I will not interrupt my guest in midstream. So we'll only, in a case like that, when I have a guest on, especially when we do our 3-hour plan, when I have a guest on Way Out There, we're only going to take a break at the top of each hour, so that we don't interrupt our guest. Now, if our guest is done and we have the last hour, we'll probably go back to the half-hour increments. But if we're doing a show like this, where we don't have a guest and it's open lines type of show, I will probably be doing every 30-minute breaks. We'll be doing breaks every 30 minutes. But that's how we're going to work it when we do our new season of this program. Because I want to be able to keep it where I'm not like the other stations that when they have a guest on their talk shows, they interrupt that guest for a commercial. I think it's kind of rude, and even though the station has to make money, it's just a matter of principle that interrupting someone just to take a 5-minute break for spots, I just have a if I'm not making money on this station, so I really don't, flat care. It's 5 o'clock right now, Central Standard Time. 5 o'clock here in Clinton, Iowa. 6 o'clock Eastern. 3 o'clock Pacific. You're listening to Way Out There right here. Yeah.
This is the GJRB Online Network.
And I'm Gary J. Rustin with you. This is Way Out There. It's 5 o'clock, and the last hour of Way Out There has begun. And we're going to continue now with a series called, of course, Strange But True. Yes, there is.
And now, stories of the strange, the bizarre, but they are true. It's time for Strange But True.
Yeah, as we're doing right now. And we're doing that right here on Way Out There. And this hour, of course, it's time for Callan otherwise known as Slap Ham, and a real strange story of scary phone calls from the dead.
How you doing? I'm Callan and this is Slapped Ham. Today we're looking at some historical cases where people claim they've received phone calls from the dead. But as always, before we dive into these fascinating stories, remember to hit that subscribe button for more awesome, creepy content just like this.
A woman identified as Bonnie O tells a shocking story about phone calls from the dead mother that she says she misses every single day. She and her mother were close, so Bonnie was devastated by the loss. A few years after her mother passed, Bonnie was celebrating Christmas. She couldn't help but feel her mother's absence on this day. Late in the evening, the phone rang. When she answered, she heard a familiar voice. It was allegedly her mother. Bonnie was in shock. She told the caller, "This can't be you, Mum, you're dead." The caller responded by saying in an agitated tone, "Oh, come on now." The phone then cut off. Many have discredited Bonnie's story, saying there's no way she could be sure that it was her mother. Bonnie insists that it was, that her mother had a distinctive Norwegian accent, and that she's 100% sure that it was her mother on the other end of the line. In 1969, a musician named Carl Uphoff was disturbed when he began receiving his own phone calls from the dead. In his case, the calls began 2 days after the death of his grandmother. According to Uphoff, his grandmother was deaf, yet she would call regularly and ask for him. His bandmates were often annoyed by these calls. His grandmother passed away and the band assumed that they would finally stop with these frustrating calls. 2 days after her death, the phone rang. Uphoff answered the phone and was shocked to hear his grandmother's voice. He asked how she could possibly be calling, which prompted her to end the call. He received several such phone calls over the next few days, but never got an answer to his questions. In 1995, a woman named Mrs. Wilson was excited to hear that a local radio show would be featuring renowned medium James Byrne. Mrs. Wilson's grandfather had passed away a year before, and she wanted badly to communicate with him. Mrs. Wilson tried to call the radio station numerous times, but Byrne was very popular and the lines were jammed. Mrs. Wilson eventually gave up. After the show, Mrs. Wilson's phone rang. When she answered, she heard a distant voice telling her that he was alright and that he was with her grandmother. Mrs. Wilson was shocked to recognize her grandfather's voice. He told her to stop living in the past and move forward because he would always be watching over her. When the call ended, Mrs. Wilson feared it was a prank. She dialed 1471 to find out the number the call came from. The service read her own number back to her, suggesting that the call came from her own phone. In the 1990s, a woman identified as Betty had never thought about receiving phone calls from the dead. That is until she had her own shocking experience shortly after beginning a new job. She was alone in the office one day while everyone was out to lunch. Her co-worker Mary's phone rang and Betty decided to answer. The man on the other end said he was looking for someone and gave a name Betty didn't recognize. The man quickly corrected himself, asking for Mary. Betty said that Mary was out and asked for a message. The man said he was Mary's brother and that he missed her at a recent family gathering. When Mary returned, Betty gave her the message. Betty was stricken, stating that her brother was dead. She said that the first unfamiliar name was a nickname her brother called her and that she had in fact missed a recent family event. Betty could not have known these details. In 2001, a woman identified as Fern tragically lost her husband. Not long after, she began dating another man. Her friends and family believed the man was taking advantage of her grief, but Fern refused to believe them. Then Fern began having dreams in which her late husband appeared. She also noticed that orbs appeared in every recent photo of her. Fern was shaken and began to pray, begging her husband to come to her in a dream again and explain his bizarre appearances. She wanted to know if he was trying to warn her about the new man in her life. The next morning when she awoke, she was unable to recall any of her dreams from that night. However, when she checked her call records, she saw her deceased husband's name in her missed calls. Frank Jones lived in his Lancashire home with his wife Sadie. According to the previous owners, the home was haunted by some sort of entity. The Jones family began having encounters with the entity, which they dubbed the Thing. Furniture was moved, taps were turned on, and sheets were ripped from beds, among other things. They eventually had the house exorcised. 5 years later, Sadie died of a heart attack. She was buried with her cell phone, as she was known to be a bit of a cell phone addict. Soon after, Frank and other family members began receiving calls and texts from the phone. One day, Frank got a call from the home phone. This was odd, as he was now the only person to live there. When he returned home, he detected the distinct odour of Sadie's cigarettes and perfume. He and his family suspect that these phone calls may have something to do with the entity that had plagued them years before. There are many people who devoted their lives to researching phone calls from the dead and other examples of ghostly voices. George Meek spent years researching ghostly voices with his colleague Konstantin Raudive. Raudive tragically passed away in 1974, but Meek continued the work alone. Meek never thought his research would hit close to home, at least not until 20 years after his partner's death, when he began receiving unexplained phone calls from Raudive. In the calls, Raudive references the pair's work studying phantom calls, stating that Raudive's presence in the afterlife would be a new chapter of research. Meek was able to make recordings of the eerie conversations, but never determined how they had been made. The voice on the other end of the line, which is allegedly Raudive, is clear and speaks with an eerie tempo.
This is Konstantin Raudive. This is the first contact you get from us. I suppose that you can hear me.
I can hear you very well, very plainly.
Fine, so this is the beginning of a new story, a new chapter, George. You are a very good friend of ours, even if we haven't met.
Many paranormal investigators have studied this shocking piece of audio, yet no one's been able to explain it. Many experts believe it to be a breakthrough in paranormal research. Others, however, have accused Meek of hoaxing the entire event to pique public interest in his work. Some have even suggested that it might be a call from the dead, but that it may not be Raudive. Instead, it might be a malevolent spirit posing as Meek's friend with intent to cause harm. This is a fascinating piece of evidence. I'd love to hear what you think in the comments section below.
We will continue this. This is the first bridge we succeeded to build to the States. Mark was connected, and I must interrupt now.
Apparently, even well-known authors are potential recipients for phone calls from the dead. One of the most famous examples of such a call comes from the author of numerous popular thrillers, Dean Koontz. According to Koontz, one day he was alone in his office. The phone there had an unlisted number, so when the phone rang he assumed he would hear a familiar voice. The voice on the other end was familiar, but definitely unexpected. It was the voice of his mother, who had been deceased for years. The voice sounded far away and warned him 4 times to be careful. She said nothing else. 2 days later, Koontz visited his father in a mental health facility. During the visit, his father shockingly pulled out a knife and tried to attack him. He was thankfully able to wrest the weapon away, but he went away shocked by the encounter. His father had never been violent before. After this surprising threat to his well-being, he couldn't help but wonder about the mysterious warning he had received just days before. Sometimes phone calls from the dead are a positive, if creepy, experience. One example is the case of Charles Peck. In 2008, Peck was killed in a tragic train accident. His fiancée and children were devastated by the loss. As they grieved, they began receiving shocking phone calls. A total of 25 people were killed in the train accident. but the searchers were unable to recover all of the bodies from the wreckage. They were prepared to give up their search when Peck's family began receiving calls from his cell phone. They could hear nothing but static. However, the calls were enough to spur the responders on in hopes of finding Peck alive. The family received a total of 35 calls over 12 hours. The last call came 1 hour before Peck's body was pulled from the wreckage. According to officials, Peck had certainly died long before the first call. Yet the calls enabled searchers to locate his body so his family could put him to rest. Before we get to that number one spot and take a look at a story about a perplexing sales phone call, remember to hit that subscribe button and turn on channel notifications. That way you'll be notified about all our latest content. A woman identified as Mary B was working in sales for a phone company when she experienced her own shocking phone call. Her job was to call potential customers and give them a sales pitch to convince them to switch phone carriers. In this particular call, she spoke to what sounded like an older woman. The woman seemed interested and asked Mary a lot of questions about phone plans. She said she thought it would be a good choice as her husband made a lot of long-distance calls and their phone bills were getting out of hand. However, she refused to make a decision without her husband's approval. She told Mary to call back the next morning when he would be home. The call was promising, so Mary followed up. This time an older man answered. Mary told him about the conversation she had had with his wife the previous day. The man was clearly upset by this. He angrily told Mary that his wife was deceased and demanded that she leave him alone. He hung up the phone, and Mary was never able to solve the mystery.
If you want to check out more of our content, there's a video there or a playlist there. If you want your name scrolling along the top there, consider supporting us on Patreon. There's a link to our campaign in the description box below. And that's it for me. I'll see you all next time.
And there you go. Slap Ham with some weird stories of calls from the grave. And you know, you have to wonder about that, though. I think that a lot of that is a gag. Someone's pulling something on somebody because, you know, like I said before, if you're getting a call from beyond, it's more or less a demon. You know, there was a program a while back on, it wasn't Coast to Coast. I think it was Dave Scott's program, Spaced Out Radio one night. They had a show talking about electronics and how they say that spirits can go into the electronic equipment, TVs, radios, whatever. And I'm going to do a show on that eventually. But, you know, again, it more than likely true. I mean, when you really think about that, you know, we always say as Christians we have to watch what we get entertained by. And I'm doing this program only to talk about this as a thing to learn that as a Christian, and in doing this program to talk, make you aware of these things, but not to mess with that kind of stuff. And I'm just telling the story in a Christian perspective to let people know that, you know, there are demons out there, but you don't mess with them, that you don't play around with that kind of stuff. And, you know, stories from about people getting calls from beyond. It could be a demon calling because, you know, they can probably rattle your phone. They can rattle your TV. They can rattle even your Alexa if they want to. The point of the matter is you just have to be careful because, you know, they love electronics. They say energy is one of them, and that's electric energy. And they play around with this stuff, so you just, you know, gotta be careful. And, you know, can't play around with that kind of stuff. And, you know, watch it because this is nothing to play with. This is The Way Out There on GJRB Online. Gary J. Russell with you, and right now we're going to do our feature, and I found the theme, and I had to re-download it. I found the theme that I want to use for the afterlife. It's time for that now. Yeah. Yeah, time for that feature we call this program where we talk about people who have died and came back. People who have suffered and died on the people who have died on the table and came back. It's time for the afterlife on GJRB.
Can't just shut it up and fake that I'm alright. I'm ready now, I'm not waiting for the afterlife.
Yeah, we're doing right now. Yeah, fabulous.
The way I feel inside, the way the day begins.
And that is the theme to our show, our segment called The Afterlife. We've been doing a two-parter on the story about a college professor that died on the table. He was he had stomach problems from the previous show. He had stomach problems. He had suffered and died on the table. He was going through a lot of pain, or a lot of that. His wife was with him when he died, and in part 2, he's on the other side in hell after he was attacked by demons, and he shouts out the name of Christ and is saved. Absolutely fab story. Here's part 2 of the college professor who dies and sees hell and demons that changed his life on Way Out There on GRB Online, right here on Spreaker.
I'm on there for time without end, thinking about my fate. And in the back of my mind comes up an image of myself as a child, sitting in a Sunday school classroom, singing Jesus Loves Me. I can hear in my mind, Jesus loves me, la la la, Jesus loves me, la la. And as I recalled myself singing it, I could hear myself as a child singing it. More important than anything else was that I could feel it in my heart that there was a time in my life when I was young and innocent, when I believed in something good, when I believed in something other than myself, when I believed in someone who was all good, all powerful, who really, really cared about me. And I knew that I wanted that back, that which I had lost, that I'd thrown away, that I'd betrayed. I wanted that back. That I didn't know Jesus, but I wanted to know Jesus. I didn't know his love, but I wanted to know his love. I didn't know if he was real, but I wanted him to be real. You know, I mean, it was all just because I trusted that there was a time in my life that I had believed in something, and that I knew I had known once as a child that it was true, and I wanted to trust that it was true. So I called out into the darkness, Jesus, please save me.
Please, save me.
And he came. He came. First there was a tiny little speck of light in the darkness, and very rapidly got bright. And the light became so bright that if it were in this world, it would have consumed me. It just would have fried me to a crisp. But it wasn't at all hot or dangerous there. The light just came upon me, and he reached down. He was in this light, and he reached down out of this light and gently started to pick me up. And in his light, I could see that I was gore and filth and wounds all over. And I looked like roadkill. And he's gently putting his hands underneath me and very tenderly picking me up. And as he's touching me, everything just goes away. All the wounds, all the pain, all the dirt, it just kind of like evaporated away. And I'm like whole and healed. And inside, just filled with His love, which I wish I could be more articulate about. It's so frustrating not being able to tell people about it, because it's the best thing that ever happened to me in my life. I mean, it's like it's the everything. It's the all of life, is to know that love. And I get to it and I just can't describe it. I can't convey it to you. So He's holding me and embracing me, rubbing my back like a father would his son, like a mother would her daughter, just gently rubbing my back. And I'm bawling like a baby, out of happiness. I mean, like the release, having been lost and now been found, having been dead and now brought back to life, and He's carrying me out of there. Up we just go. Out, go on. And we're moving towards a world of light, and I began to have thoughts of tremendous shame that I've been so bad, I thought of myself as dirt, garbage, filth. And I thought to myself, He's made a mistake. I don't belong here. He doesn't want me. It's like the shame of, like, how could he care about me? Why me? I'm bad. And we stopped. We weren't in hell, we weren't in heaven. We were in between. And we stopped, and He said, we don't make mistakes. You belong here. And we began to converse, and He was talking and telling me things, and He brought over some angels, and we went over my life from beginning to end. And what they wanted to show me in my life was what I had done right and what I had done wrong. And without going through my whole life story, it was real simple. When I had been a loving, kind person, considerate of other people, it made the angels happy, it made Jesus happy, and they let me know that it made God happy. And when I had been selfish and manipulative, it made the angels unhappy, it made Jesus unhappy, and they let me know that it made God unhappy. What they were trying to convey to me, in a nutshell, was my whole purpose of my existence had been to love God, love my neighbor as myself. That's why I had been created. That's what I was in this world to do and to learn. And I had failed. They told me that I had to come back to this world. And I got real upset because I wanted to go to heaven. What they told me about heaven, it's like the most fun, most interesting. I mean, it's the most wonderful place. I mean, everybody would want to go to heaven, and I wanted to get there. And they said that I wasn't ready, I wasn't fit, that it wasn't my time to go to heaven. It was my time to come back to this world and try and live the way that God wanted me to live, the way God had created me to live in the first place. I told them, Jesus and the angels, that I couldn't live in this world without them. And I said that my heart would break to send me back to this world, because they'd be there and I'd be here. And they said to me, you don't get it? What is the matter? We were showing you all this, we've explained to you. We've always been there. We always have been there. We've always been with you all this time. And you've never been alone down there. And I said, you've got to let me know that you're around once in a while. So they said, if I prayed and confessed my sins to God, gave what I had, and what they meant by what I had was gave my worries, my cares, my hopes, my dreams, just gave it all up to God. That there would be times when they would be there, and I would know in my heart that they were there. Wouldn't necessarily see them or hear them, but I would feel the love like I'd felt it then. And I said, if you will assure me that there are times when I can know that love, I could live in this world. And I said that they would do that, and with that they sent me back. After the experience, the nurse who had been in the room a few minutes before and said they couldn't find a doctor, and they tried to get one the next time, she came running back to the room and she said a doctor's arrived at the hospital, which was like, this is all pretty miraculous stuff, because this is now like 9:30 at night, around 9:30 at night. She said, doctor's arrived at the hospital and we're going to have do surgery on you right away. And some orderlies and people came in and they threw my wife out of the room. And it's very disturbing because I was trying to tell them and I wanted to tell my wife what had happened to me. So when I passed my wife in the hall on the gurney on the way to the surgery, I said, everything's going to be great. And she just started bawling because she thought like that was like a dying man, you know. You know. Strange thing about the experience is the memory hasn't dulled at all. It's real intense. And I don't know, it stays intense. And I believe that one of the reasons that God gave me this experience so that I would have an opportunity to share it with someone. I don't know who, I never know who, but I would have the opportunity to share it with somebody so that it could be of help to them.
And that's what we should do, you know. I am the way, the truth, and the life, and you know, he is he's God. And aside from all the nice little fun stories of ghosts and UFOs and stuff like that, I like to use this feature to get you, you know, because you know, practicing witchcraft and the evil that goes with it. You know, just the topics, the conversation during our last 7 days in this program, you know, there's evil in the world and we need to combat it. We need to stand up for Jesus. We need to stand up for his love. And we need to reach people for Christ. And I'm using this broadcast, this program, to, you know, talk about the strange, the bizarre, the unusual, the things that people like to get into, and let them know that it, you know, playing around with Ouija boards and ways to purposely contact ghosts is evil. You just don't mess with that kind of stuff. You just, you know, you're inviting, you don't know what you're inviting. And you need to seriously think, you know, we're not going to do this. We're not going to play around with evil. And need to stay away from it. Because Christ loves us. He doesn't want us to be, you know, playing around with demon forces. But we're to reach people who are doing that and tell them it's wrong, that it's evil. That we don't play around with that. But to turn our lives to Christ. We're going to go to a good place. And the world's coming to an end. Look at all the news going on and now. Iran had an earthquake, 6.6 on the Richter scale. That's pretty bad. God's trying to reach those people, but they're not listening. Maybe it's time we do listen. And it's time we stop letting evil win. Maybe it's time to stop and think about Christ first. Because the evil is not going to let you do that. It's time to turn our lives to Him, Jesus Christ, because He's the way, the truth, and the life. And the evil forces that these kids are playing with, they're playing with fire, and they need to stop. It's time now to get away from that. You know, like that guy said, you know, he was a believer, but he soon found out that, you know, non-believing in Christ is going to send you to hell. If you're a believer and you're baptized in Christ, you're going to go to a beautiful place called heaven. Don't have time for that other segment I was going to bring you, but we're going to do it on the next program. We're going to start a new series on more people who have died and went to heaven. But first, before they got there, they went to hell. You heard the one we just played. We're going to have another one just like it. Another interview segment. So tune in next season to Way Out There right here on GJRB Online. Probably what will happen is I'll have on that program the first hour. I do what I did at the first hour, news and strange but true and stuff like that. And then the second hour I'll have a guest segment. Most of my guests will only be on for maybe about an hour, maybe an hour and a half at most. And then we're going to wrap up the show. You never know. We might end up expanding this program. You never just know. I might hit that fourth hour mark. But for right now, we're going to try to squeeze everything into 3 hours. You know, the first hour, we're just going to do what I always do. Second hour, we'll have a guest. And then the final hour, we'll do the coast-to-coast guest lineup and stuff. And let you know what's going to come up on the next program. So that's coming up. So the next time we do this show, a brand new format of Way Out There. So tune in for that. Meanwhile, though, I'm going to take a break here, and I'm going to take a break here and flip over real quick. Station identification, and then we're going to do our local Clinton weather forecast. Take a look at some of our Quad City forecast, see what's going on there, and then we'll do our Spreaker shout outs and promotions, and wrap it up with our coast to coast guest lineup. So we'll probably just go just a little bit over that 6 o'clock hour, but we're going to wrap up Way Out There in just a few minutes here on GJRB. Be right back.